Thank you, Dr. Marshall, and thanks for spearheading this hearing. In my opinion, this will be one of the more important hearings that we in science, space, and technology hear in the entire year. Dr. Gerstein, I read your book, Bioterror in the 21st Century, and I really think it should be required reading for every member of Congress. If we're responsible for legislating and appropriating money for bioterror, it's eye-opening, and as you allude to, the mass casualty count could be horrific. It would pale anything we've ever seen before. The field of genetic engineering, genetic modification, whatever you want to call it, sometimes gets beat up pretty bad in the press, but if my medical history serves me right, I think this goes back to maybe 30 or 40 years ago when the pseudorabies vaccine with the recombinant DNA was actually come on the scene. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand that Hep B vaccines, interferon that we use for cancer, all these wonderful things in technology and medicine that not only save lives but feed our world are due to research and technology. Dr. Wagstrom, you said that you know, we'll need 70% of food production increase by 2050, which means you know, we're looking at 200 bushel acre soybeans, 300 bushel acre corn, which is not attainable now. But if we are expected as America to feed the world, as we heretofore have always done, then we've got to get there. We have in this committee, and it's certainly gone national and worldwide now, we've heard about the CRISPR-Cas9, the genetic engineering technology. I know, Dr. Gerstein, you've written extensively on the horrors of CRISPR in a bioterrorist's hands. And we know the wonderful things it can do with single and now multiple gene mutations as far as curing children with leukemias, curing possible children with sickle cell, those types of deal. So I guess my question, and all of you are eminently qualified to weigh in on this, where do we go from here? We need to move forward. We need to move forward very quickly. And you know, what's the next step in your opinion? And Dr. Gerstein, I'll start with you and just go down the line.
Well, thank you for that, and thanks for the plug for the book.
It's a great book.
Thank you. So, you know, I'm going to come at this from a Department of Homeland Security perspective and say that what I worry about is either accidental use of something or deliberate use of something that results in a catastrophe, some sort of biological pathogen. And so I'm going to kind of stick to those. When I talk about areas like CRISPR as a technology, I don't talk about it as being a danger, but it could be a danger if the technology is misused. And so the key for us is to understand that in the realm of biotechnology, much of the area has become very de-skilled. You know, if you talk to people from the old weapons program that we had back in the 50s and 60s, they talked about people at the bench with good hands. And today, many of those technologies don't require good hands, and you can do fine in preparing pathogens that could be very useful as biological weapons. Or you could make manipulations to genomes that could actually be dangerous. And so I worry about monitoring the different areas where the technology is being used and understanding what a potential an individual with, say, a nefarious intent could be doing with that. In fact, that's one of the reasons why the Director of National Intelligence in 2016 had identified the gene editing as a worldwide global threat, and that caused a great deal of fervor. But I think what he was signaling was that biotechnology has gotten to the point where it really does reside, in many cases, not just in labs, but in our communities as well.
I'll just make a comment on CRISPR-Cas9. I was on the National Academy Committee reviewing that technology. I suppose it was the speed of development which shocked me. By the time we held our first meeting, I was getting emails for $120 you could buy these kits suitable for high school students to do this. It was just astounding.
Yeah, thank you also for this question. I view the genome editing field, of which CRISPR-Cas is the sort of the main technology, it will revolutionize how we improve crops, because crop improvement through biotechnology, I will call it tinkering. It's like playing with Lincoln Logs, whereas the CRISPR-Cas, we will be able to basically take a genome and it'll be like a word processor, edit, change a letter here or there, and do that in a designed way. So the speed and precision at which we'll be able to do that is wonderful. I use the example of our 120-year experiment. We actually, in my lab right now, are trying, using CRISPR-Cas to see if we can accelerate that to a 5-year time frame. We're trying to make some of those same changes that breeding took 120 years to accumulate. Can we do this in 5? So the speed and precision will be phenomenal. That said, and it's been alluded to in the earlier answers, that also democratizes, if you will, the ability to practice this technology. And so that is maybe a real role for the federal government in how do we connect the technology with society, with the end users, and make that so that the recognition of its potential and the responsibility to use it is that society understands that and is engaged in that process. I yield.
Thank you for the question. Obviously, technology affects all areas of agricultural production, especially in pig production. We look at it as a way to help us maximize animal health and animal welfare and help us produce that 70% more food. For us, obviously, PRRS is a immense issue. It's a pathogen that causes a lot of secondary bacterial infections, probably one of the reasons we use some of the antibiotics we do. So as we look at developing a PRRS-resistant pig, we think we'll not only be able to have healthier pigs but use less antibiotics. We also see technology as a potential to help us develop alternatives to the current antibiotics we use that may have less antibiotic-resistant consequences throughout the food chain. I'm a liaison to the Presidential Advisory Committee, our Council on Combating Antimicrobial-Resistant Bacteria, and we've actually, one of our recommendations in our last report is that we put together an innovation institute within the USDA that would help people who are researching alternatives to antimicrobials and other areas try to go through a uncertain regulatory process, because these are uncertain where they belong in the regulatory chain, and get those commercialized. So we look at not only at technology as improving pig breeding, but also improving our tools to raise our animals.
Thank you, Dr. Marks, for the extra time.